Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Courtney and I like to read books around here. So this week I am taking inspiration from one of my favorite booktubers, Alexa Ray, and I'll link her down below. But a couple of months ago, she did a book tag, a book recommendations tag, and I remember watching that and thinking it was such a fun time. So that's what I'm going to be doing today. I actually took all the questions that she answered, wrote them down and cut them up because I'm filming on my phone. A little behind the scenes from you, so I can't have the questions on my phone. And I don't know if you can see her, but we do have a guest visitor today. This is Lola. You want to say hi, Lola? Say hi, Lola. Anyway, she likes to sit in my lap at all points in time, so she will be here. You might see the top of her head every now and then. I have this cup of questions here. I'm gonna pull one out and I'm gonna give you a recommendation. Throughout this video, I'm going to be popping up the pictures of the books on the screen. One, because I'm sat crisscross applesauce on the floor, and I don't want to get up and down and go up and down all my stairs a bunch of times. And the other thing is that about a third of my books are in Iowa with my sister. She started reading again last year and I sent her a bunch of books to see what she liked. Basically, all of my favorite books are in Iowa with her. Before we get started, I do want to say happy 1 month to us. We've been doing this now for 4 weeks in a row, which is so fun. If you're here and you're watching the video, please like and subscribe. That would be great. I would love to hit a whole 10 subscribers at this point. So if you could do that, if you're here watching, that would be great. But thanks for coming back and thanks for hanging out with me. The first question is, a book you tell people is your favorite? Ooh, that's a tough one. I would probably say, just top of mind, say Book Lovers by Emily Henry. When I read that book, I was like, okay, I think this has set a new precedent for me. I would say that that's probably my favorite book, but that's a hard one. I would say that I don't have a good answer for it. I'm glad we started on that question. Yeah, so we'll go with Book Lovers by Emily Henry as a book that I tell people is my favorite book. Bless you. Next question is, a book that deserves more hype. You know what, for this one, I'm going to say Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I actually think I have that book here. No. I don't have that. I think that Rachel Lynn Solomon came out of the gates guns a-blazing with X-Talk and everybody was really caught up in that. But I think that Weather Girl is the better book. It's about the main character, I think her name might be Ari. That might also be our love interest's name. I don't really remember. Ari suffers from depression, but it's written in a way that is like so understandable and so relatable, and also not something that she has learned to cope with as an adult yet, and she kind of like stuffs it away. Ari, we're gonna call her Ari. If I'm wrong, I'm very sorry. That rhymed. Okay, Ari works at a news station and she is a weather girl. That's where the name comes from. And she is struggling to get constructive feedback and growth from her boss. Her boss is part of a couple that runs the station. There's two bosses. They were married. They're getting a divorce and they've caused chaos in the newsroom. And Aria is feeling really frustrated with it. So she ends up teaming up with the news guy, sportsman. Yeah, he's the sports guy. I think his name is Jake, and if it's not, it should have been, because that's a great sports guy name. They team up to try and get their bosses to fall back into love. Obviously, they might stumble into each other in that case. I really love more literary fiction based books. That's not fair. I like more literary fiction in my romance. I love an actual romance plotline, but I love to see the female character really like come into her own, or even the male character, but it's usually from the woman's perspective. That's my favorite type of romance. That one I feel like surprised me because I didn't love the X-Talk, but I picked up Weather Girl and I don't see anybody really talk about it. I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars, but I haven't seen very much talk about it. So that would be the book I think deserves more hype. A book that you wish you could live in. This one is interesting because like sci-fi or fantasy usually has some like oppressive political structure. So I don't want to be like, yeah, I'll just go live in that world. Oh, okay. So what I'm going to say for this one is that I would like to live in the Brown Sister trilogy world, which is just England. They're just posh England girls. Chloe Danny and Eve. They're three sisters just living it up, and their like family is rich and they live in a really fancy house and they have a super cool grandma. And I think it would be really cool to be a part of that family in that world. I think too, because in romance, there's like not a lot of noise going on externally to the plotline. You're not getting a lot of like current events. I really like reading books that feel that kind of like cozy escapism, and I feel like the Brown Sister trilogy really did that. So I would say I would like to live in the Brown Sister trilogy. I feel like Chloe and I would get along really well. Danny and I would respect each other, and I would just take Eve under my wing, and she seems like a little weirdo. So I feel like that would be a really fun time. A book you'd recommend when asked. Ooh, okay. That's a fun question. I think baseline, a really good book for just about anybody, is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This book was recommended to me by my friend. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch is the whole reason that I'm even interested in reading fantasy or science fiction now, because it opened that door for me that I thought had shut after reading like Twilight in high school. You know what I mean? Dark Matter follows a character. I brought my laptop over. We're gonna look up his name. Jason. Of course it's Jason. Jason is something very smart. A PhD in maybe physics, something along those lines. I'm not gonna cheat and keep looking up the synopsis. I do remember enough of it to remember that I liked it. Jason was pursuing a PhD in physics when he chose to go a different path and get married and have a child with his college girlfriend. And so we start the book looking at Jason and his kind of happy, slow-paced, more mundane life. He's very happy. I would say not happy. I would say that Jason is content in his life. And then one night he goes to get ice cream, I think, and he's attacked. He's thrown into this sci-fi based existence where he wakes up and his life is not his life anymore. And you kind of follow him trying to get back to his life. It's a really quick paced book, but it's a really fun read. And there's like twists. This man just wants to get back to his family, and it's very, very beautiful, and I really liked it. So I highly recommend that. That's kind of my baseline recommendation if people haven't read it and they're even remotely interested. Okay, next up we have a book that everyone loved and you didn't. So I have the X-Talk up here. The X-Talk by Rachel Lynn Solomon. Oh, you know what? This is actually not the book that I want to talk about. I didn't love this book either, but I thought it was fine. I actually didn't like The Roughest Draft. It's co-authored by two authors. I don't think I have that one up here either. So I'm gonna put that guy back. I thought I was gonna get to tell you about that one, but no, that's actually not the book that I want to talk about. I pulled it up because I couldn't remember the author's names, and I'm gonna read them off because I would forget them as soon as I sat this down. The Roughest Draft by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegben Broca. This book was kind of marketed as the better beach read, and I disagree with that. I do think that maybe if beach read wasn't your thing, Roughest Draft might be for you, but they're not the same. I don't know a lot of people that liked both, but I do know a lot of people that loved Roughest Draft, and I just didn't. It's about two characters. It's like a writing duo. See, similar to Beach Read. It's about a writing duo who had a falling out a number of years ago, and when they basically are being held to their contract to write another book together. There's a lot of tension between the two of them for whatever reason, and the book is kind of unfolding the tension between them and leaning into this book that they're now writing together. First of all, the book inside the book, the character's name is Jessamine. Why would we do that? That's ridiculous. I don't like when literary fiction or romance books give their characters insane names. I'm looking at you, Colleen Hoover, okay? Chill on some of the names that you give people. Give them just names. Give them names. Jessamine is a choice. I didn't like it. It took me out of the book because I was like, Jessamine in a romance novel? Groundbreaking. I just didn't connect with the characters enough to justify their action. I would say Roughest Draft is Beach Read's moodier cousin. And if you're into that, I think you might like it, but it it wasn't for me, and I know it was for a lot of people. But that's what happens. Sometimes you read a book and it's just not a hit. So, moving on. Ooh, okay. A book that has your favorite characters. Oh, for this one, I'm gonna say The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This cast of characters is so fun and so sweet. It follows essentially a caseworker for magical youth. And if you are a magical youth or a magical person, you have any sort of number of qualities. You can look any sort of way and you have to be registered. And there is like, it's called something like the big bad government or something like that. The very upper high management who manages magical people and keeps the registry. And then our main character, I think his name is Linus. Linus is essentially given this like top secret case where he has to go out to the house in the Cerulean Sea to check on the house master, Arthur, and his treatment of the magical youth. So Linus needs to go and check and make sure he's doing everything by the book, which is a little nuts. So he goes out there and he meets Arthur, but first he meets the kids, the magical youth that Arthur is in charge of. And the kids are just wonderful. They're so unique. There is a character who is like a blob, like think of like Slime. What is that movie with Robin Williams in it? Flubber. He's like a flubber. There's a literal antichrist. They call him Lucy, and he is just like this sweet little boy who wants everything and everyone to burn in a hell for all eternal time. There's a little gnome girl, there's a little fairy girl, and they're just so sweet, and there's so much love in this story, and you can't get better than this cast of characters, like point blank period. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's very cozy. I had a smile the whole time that I was reading it. A book that's becoming a TV show or a movie? I don't really know. I feel like that is not my area of expertise. I watch a lot of YouTube and a lot of Love Island. I'm gonna change this question because I don't like it. A book that I would like to see become a movie is any of Emily Henry's books. You know what? Actually, strike that. We're gonna go back to the Brown Sisters. I think that the Brown Sister trilogy could be a wonderful mini series, and I think it should be. I think it should be a little mini series where we get to watch Chloe, Danny, and Eve all fall in love with their respective love interests. I think the timelines could overlap. I think that there's really a lot of material to work with in that. It could be like on HBO Max or Max. I've heard that they've rebranded. It could be on Max because it gets a little bit steamy. So that is what I recommend, and I would like to see it now. Thank you very much. Here's my little cup. A book that made me cry. The last book that made me kind of like lose it was A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman. This book destroyed me, and I didn't really think I was gonna like this book, to be honest. It was very slow, and it was slow to build, and you're learning about Ove, who's an old man, and he's kind of a jerk. Like, Ove is a jerk. He's not a great person. He has a lot of issues. He's just like an old school grumpy old dude. He's just going about the end of his life, essentially. He is like forced into a situation where his neighbors decide that they're not going to let him kind of isolate for the rest of his life. They're gonna force him to be friends with everybody, and Ove begrudgingly falls into that pattern, getting snippets of Ove's life and how he was brought up and why he ended up like this, and this like beautiful sadness that surrounded his life, and also just the way he fell in love with his wife and how that all played out. And the last probably 20 pages, I was just in bed, tears streaming down my face. I just couldn't get a grip. And after the end of the book, I just held the book on my chest and just wept for like 10 minutes. I just needed a moment. It just touched this little part of my soul that was like, oh, I can't believe I got to read this book. So that book really did an emotional number on me, is what it did. That is the book that I would say most recently had me in tears. We have a book that I read the fastest. I would say that I read Verity by Colleen Hoover the fastest. Say what you will about our queen co-host, she knows how to write a book that you're gonna read fast. And Verity was no different. I think I read it in 2 days. I borrowed it from a friend, and 2 days later I was able to hand it to her and be like, thank you so much for letting me read this. We have this young woman writer. It's all told from her perspective. She's not doing well. She's kind of coping with the recent death of her mom. She is presented this unique opportunity to be the ghostwriter for the author Verity, who was recently she fell into a coma. She had an accident. She hasn't come back. So basically Verity is comatose with not a lot of brain activity, and they want to finish out her contract as a writer, and so they bring in a ghostwriter. We meet the husband of Verity, who's looking for this ghostwriter, and basically he says, you can come stay at our house. We have our son there. Verity is there, but she's entirely comatose, and you can search her office just to see if you can get inspiration for writing and finishing the rest of this book series. Of course, our character is in a compromising situation, as all kind of suspense novels are. As somebody who is like rich and satisfied and fulfilled is not going to move into somebody's house to finish out writing a book contract. So of course the main girl has no money, has no apartment, has no job, all that stuff. So she agrees to go out to finish out this contract. And you spend the whole book trying to put together what is happening and what has happened. If you're like craving kind of like a, oh my God, what is happening here kind of book, I do recommend Verity by Colleen Hoover. Okie dokie, I need to talk faster. A book that deserves the hype that it gets. You know what? I'm gonna say that ACOTAR, A Court of Thorns and Roses, ACOTAR deserves the hype that it gets. I wasn't all that stoked on book 1, but the way that it's written really makes you excited to continue reading. I do think that that's a premature recommendation because I haven't finished it, but book 1, the whole time I was like, this is fun, I'm having a good time. It's not groundbreaking, I'm not like, oh my God, I can't put this book down, but I had a good time. And towards the end, there's just enough drama and enough action to be like, oh God, okay, this is the world we live in, cool. And then I just couldn't help but pick up the next book. Because you get such an established relationship for Feyre and Tamlin and Rhysand in the first book, going into the second book, you feel their feelings because you're already so much more connected to them. I would say thus far, ACOTAR deserves all the hype that it gets. Wah! I'm obsessed. I'm hooked. I'm like 10% into book 2 and I'm like, wow, I love this so much. Yeah, if you haven't checked it out, I think it's good. I was really worried that it wasn't gonna be for me. And you know what? It is for me. A book that is your guilty pleasure. For this guy, I'm gonna give you the recommendation of Bittersweet by Morgan Elizabeth. Morgan Elizabeth is a KU indie author. She writes basically like fun, smutty books. And I've read 4 of her books. 2 of them I really liked and 2 of them I didn't like all that much. And with Morgan Elizabeth, you'll find that her characters can sometimes seem very similar to other characters in her books. So Bittersweet is my personal favorite. It follows a girl who is a baker. She just started her own bakery and she starts her bakery right next to a tattoo shop, and she ends up kind of falling in with the tattoo shop owner, who is this like gruff kind of jerk and thinks that the bakery girl is spoiled and doesn't deserve to get there and only got there because of daddy's money. It is a little bit romantic suspense, but I think the 2 characters in this book, when you think enemies to lovers in romance, I would say that these are 2 characters that you're like, okay, I get it. You 2 do not like each other, but I think that there's a lot of like, will they, won't they? I really recommend it if you're looking for kind of a spicy good time, and it is definitely a guilty pleasure read. You're not going to be like, oh my God, the next Jane Austen. If that strikes your fancy, I'd give it a read. A book in a genre that you don't typically read. Oh, in my heart of hearts, I am romance girl. Romance is tied with literary fiction for me. And then after that, I would say probably sci-fi. Way down at the bottom is horror. I read The Troop by Nick Cutter, and that book scared the ever-loving shit out of me. There's a lot of kind of body horror and animal cruelty, but more so, yeah, animal cruelty, I would say. A troop of boys, the troop, if you will, who go on like a Boy Scouts vacation to an island in the middle of a lake, or I think a lake. This man shows up sick. He drags himself up the rocks, and the troop master lets him in and is basically like, dude, I'm so sorry, we need to contain you, like, you don't look well. Then other people start getting sick in the story, and we start to see flashbacks about how this sickness was developed, and it's disgusting. That book is nasty, 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 nasty. It scared me so bad that I couldn't really read it unless it was in the broad light of day, until it got to the point that I was like, okay, I have to know what happened. Oh God, that one hurt. It was hard to get through. It's disgusting. Still to this day, I have like images of the words floating around in my head. If you're into horror, then you might check it out. It grossed me out, man. And it put me off horror. And I don't know that I'm ready to start that journey again for myself. That's a book that was a genre that I do not typically read. And I don't know that I'm going to read another one anytime soon. A book that you wish you could reread for the first time. I'm gonna have to kick it back to Book Lovers for this one. Book Lovers by Emily Henry. That book, for me, I knew within 2 pages that I was gonna love it, and I would love to reread it for the first time. I actually struggle with rereading books because I can't forget what I already read. Like, I was rereading Harry Potter for a while, but I just was bored. I was like, I know what happens. How am I supposed to be interested? But who knows? Oh, that's funny. The next question is a book that you reread the most. We're gonna have to like kick it back old school. The book that I reread the most was Twilight. Not Twilight. I reread Breaking Dawn the most. Oh, it really did it for me. I reread Twilight so much in high school that I bound my books in paper so that people wouldn't make fun of me, because I always had one of those books on me. You know what? I liked it. I'm not even ashamed that I liked it. It's here to stay, okay? We've made it to our last and final question, which is a book that you thought you'd hate, but you loved. I didn't think that I was going to love Ready Player One by Ernest Cline as much as I loved it. I listened to this book on audio, and up until that point, I hadn't listened to a 5-star audiobook. It was eluding me. And so I picked up Ready Player One, just kind of like, I knew the title, it sounded interesting, and Ready Player One is like a cultural touchstone for so many people. I didn't think I was gonna love it because it's a science fiction book, it's about a teenage boy, and it was an audiobook. But I loved that book. I loved it so much. And it's about Wade Watts, who is a teenager who lives in a dystopian future where everybody lives their life in virtual reality. And the only hope for anybody to escape like abject poverty is to find an Easter egg in the game that was left there by its creator. It feels nostalgic in a really comforting way. I recommend Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. That is going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for coming by and hanging out. I hope you got something out of this video, maybe a book that you're gonna go read, maybe a book you're gonna avoid, or maybe a book that we share the same opinion on. Thank you so much for hanging out, and I will see you next week. Bye!